Volume recommendations for intermediate lifters. After 1 or 2 years of consistent high-effort training, focused on progressive overload and supported by a proper diet with a good rest and recovery, the lifter should now find himself in the intermediate stage. This stage is marked by a noticeable decrease in the rate of muscle growth, but intermediates should be able to pack on an albeit smaller, still very similar amount of muscle as they did when they were beginners, so in their first 1 or 2 years of training. It's just that this time, instead of taking another 1 or 2 years, it will probably take them 2 or 3 years more to do just that. Now, for the lifter to maintain the muscle that he has already built, I would say a bare minimum of around 3 hard sets per muscle group per week would suffice. Yes, the amount of volume to maintain gains, it's very, very low. I'm not saying that the lifter can maintain forever the gains that he achieved using such low volume, but he definitely can maintain for many, many months. It's literally that ridiculously low. I mean, you could do just 3 hard sets of barbell bench press, for example, or 3 sets of push-ups. As long as the intensity is there and as long as you're going close to failure, meaning the effort is there, the lifter can definitely maintain those gains for many, many months. To make gains, the optimal amount of volume seems to sit at around 13 to 15 hard sets per muscle group per week. But if the lifter really wants to squeeze out every inch of possible gains out of his training week, it could go all the way up to 20. But I would recommend doing that only for specific body parts that are lagging behind or that he may have a special interest in bringing up. Because doing 20 sets per week for every single muscle group, it can be so exhausting to the point that the lifter may start to decrease the effort put into the execution of his sets. And not only that, doing 20 sets leads to an unnecessary increase in the speed of systemic fatigue accumulation for a disproportionately smaller amount of muscle gain. Speaking of systemic fatigue, I would say that the lifter should now start to include deload weeks into his training plan, which are weeks where the lifter decreases his training volume and decreases his training effort, just to allow the body to recover. A good ballpark would be to slash his volume in half and decrease the training effort to an RPE of around 6 or 7. And I would say you should do this every 8 to 12 weeks or 2 or 3 months of a consistent hard training. So to recap, 10 to 20 hard sets per muscle group per week for the lifter to work close or at his maximum potential of muscle growth without incurring in an increased risk of injuries or overtraining. So the lifter can work closer to the 10 sets for general muscle building and closer to 20 sets for special body parts that he's trying to prioritize. But even so, the idea is not to jump into 20 sets in the first week right after the deload. You want to do this gradually over time. But if the lifter is still hell-bent on doing 20 sets per week per muscle group, I would recommend working on the lower end of the recommended RPE scale. So say an RPE of around 7 or 8. So if you're following a training plan right now and you're doing north of 20 sets per week per muscle group, I would recommend doing an honest and objective assessment of the effort that you're putting into the execution of your sets. And ask the question, do I really need all these sets or should I up my exertion and reduce the number of sets? Because with hypertrophy, you can't replace intensity with, you can't replace effort with volume. You can to some extent, but from what I've learned, there's just something you get from doing, say, 10 sets with an RPE of around 8 to 10. Then you get from doing 20 sets with an RPE of 5 to 7. A perfect example of quality versus quantity. Now, the small training plan samples that I've been including along with these volume recommendation videos that I've done since the newbie stage up until now, the intermediate, these These plans are only focused on the chest and the quads, but let's not forget that the lifter has also meanwhile been training all his other body parts, right? The back, the posterior chain of the legs, his abs, etc. And assuming that he's still he has been training only 3 days per week, it may now start to become very difficult to include all of these volume increases into one single workout. So one last recommendation would be for the lifter to increase his training frequency. So the number of days that he comes to the gym, he should increase now those number of days to 4, 5, or even 6 days. He can still work his chest and his quads 3 times per week. But all the other parts will now start to have their own dedicated days, so that he can specifically, so that he can focus on those parts and they don't start lagging behind. But anyway, the intermediate job is not to overly obsess about volume or advanced intensity techniques or frequency, none of that. The real job of an intermediate is to really start trying to be diligent with the implementation of the fundamentals. And I mean really seriously trying to master the fundamentals. Because the characteristic that defines an advanced lifter is his mastery of the basics. And unless the lifter has very good genetics, is not going to be able to reach the advanced stage unless he really starts trying to nail down the fundamentals.